Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Each week, we hear real-time stories from athletes and CEOs on how to maximize performance through an endurance mindset. Let's get started. Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Today's guest has created strategic partnerships which drive revenue between companies, agencies, and sports properties. He has successfully negotiated multi-year contracts with some of the biggest brands in the world, including Coke, Pepsi, Gatorade, Audi, Samsung, SAP, the NFL, and Morgan Stanley. He's an endurance athlete with a love for triathlon, mountain climbing, ice climbing, marathon, jiu-jitsu, and cycling. Please welcome Lee Zohlman. Lee, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. What an intro. That's great to hear that you pulled out all of those tidbits.
I don't know where you have free time, but we'll get into that in a few minutes.
Not much.
Yeah. Well, as you know, Lee, we love talking about endurance and the endurance mindset. Tell me how your endurance mindset has impacted your life unexpectedly.
Great question. I don't think that I had an awareness of the endurance mindset until a number of years ago. And I started, I was a swimmer all growing up and then transitioned into triathlon, not to age me, in 1996. So that's the ultimate endurance sport, right? Triathlon. So, but I don't think, I became aware of how it affected me professionally until a number of years ago, in really doing sports sponsorship, in going after sports sponsorship. The endurance mindset is one where, listen, you don't stop, right? The endurance mindset it's for the long haul. We're not here for the sprint. And in sponsorship, they typically take a long time to craft, to open and to close. And so I think if, for you to ask that question, the endurance mindset is perfect for, what I do on a daily basis, which is sports sponsorship, and what I've been doing for so long, is that you have to stay with it and you can't stop. And you always have to stay focused in the moment, make every moment count, just like in an endurance race. You have to make every moment count, every email, every word count, every strategy call count. And I think about that a lot when I'm doing my day-to-day business routine, that this is, going to be more of a long haul, and, and that I just have to take my time and stay with it. Just like you're in a race, you can't quit in a race, and you can't quit when you're going after a sponsorship deal. So I hope that kind of answered the question. It was a great question.
Thank you. Yeah, you nailed it for sure. Digging into that a little bit deeperly, when you're in a situation, in a negotiation or a race, and you feel stuck because you're in the middle of this endurance journey, how have you unstuck yourself?
I raced triathlons, cycling races, running races, any endurance thing I really could get my hand on for almost 20 years straight. And I definitely learned a thing or two about the dark times and, about being in the valleys. And in talking with other endurance athletes, you have these peaks and valleys during races. And just because you're in a valley doesn't mean a peak isn't coming up soon. And when you're on the peak, you have to be ready for how to address what happens when you're in a valley. And in the business world, it's kind of the same, and I'm dealing with it right now. I have complications with a number of different sponsors and sponsor deals going on. And I think, to answer your question, no matter if it's a race or a training session or a sponsorship deal, I immediately just go to, hey, what are my solutions? I don't think backwards. I work in motorsports, right? So right now I work for an IndyCar team. I head up the commercial division for an IndyCar team. So, working in the partnerships, I'm always thinking about focus forward, because that's a saying that we have in motorsports, focus forward. If you have a bad last lap, bad last turn, you're not thinking about it. Same thing in triathlon, right? If the swim went really poorly, you have to stay focused on where you are at that moment, looking forward, on the bike or on the run, and not thinking backwards. So I think about that when I'm going through complications with deals. I think about focus forward and what are the solutions, just pivot thinking to what kind of solutions do I have? And if you don't have them, fortunately, you might have a good team. You might have other colleagues that do have other solutions. So going over it with them, and obviously I'm talking kind of like a real life scenario I had about an hour ago. I pinged a colleague to go over some solutions. So, another great question.
And he left me a little breadcrumb there, and you talked about teams. Walk us through how, in a negotiation, a sponsorship negotiation, how you utilize your team and the teamwork to either come up with different solutions, different angles. But because to me, negotiations feel very one-on-one, but it's truly not. It's really a team to team. So walk us through your team dynamic and how you support each other.
Sure. So our team dynamic typically in the sponsorship discussions, it'll be myself. We will have our CMO in on as well, and our CMO is great, creative thinker, strategic thinker, very experienced. We will have maybe an account director on the meeting as well, and it's really talking about, hey, what are our solutions for your objectives, and how can we use our team and our assets to come up with some solutions for whatever your business goals are. And so through a number of different conversations, identifying whatever objectives that company or brand has, and then coming up with some really cool different activations or partnership assets to present to them. Then Mark and I will generally rehearse them ahead of time. And the CMO and I will rehearse ahead of time, how we want the flow to go. So we make sure we hit on all the appropriate points. And then we'll present to the client.
So you mentioned rehearsing, and one of the things that I come across a lot in the business world is the lack of preparation, the lack of practice, the lack of rehearsing amongst teams, especially when you compare them to sports teams, right? Sports teams have a coach for everything. They've got the playbook. They've run their plays 1,000 times before even the gun goes off. Walk us through how much rehearsing the two of you do or your team does before you actually, come to play and execute on your strategy.
Sure. And actually, I want to do one better. I want to relate it back to endurance sports. Awesome. And when I used to race, the night before every race, as I was falling asleep, I would go into this deep visualization of how I wanted the race to go, literally moment by moment, how I wanted the race to go. So much so that if it was a triathlon race, when I was visualizing the cycling part, my legs would actually start moving up and down while I'm trying to fall asleep at night. And so that visualization, obviously you're visualizing it in the most positive light possible, right? You're visualizing the perfect swim stroke, the perfect pull under the water, the perfect pedal stroke, right? Good flowing on the run, all of that good stuff. So you're always visualizing the positive light. And then when the team gets together and we rehearse a pitch for a potential sponsor, we're going over the presentation that we're going to present to them. We're going over every point on it, and we're taking a beat, and we're taking a pause, and we're thinking, okay, what can they address on this point? What could be their objective, their objection on this point, and what are our solutions? Generally speaking, when we present it, we'll usually meet for like 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the client, once the presentation is done. And then again, 15 to 30 minutes prior to the actual pitch, like right before. But generally, if we've gone to a time with a company where we're presenting our proposal, there really shouldn't be too many objections from their side, because we've already gone through so much discovery that we know that whatever we're presenting has got to be an answer for them. So it's more it's more collaborative once we get to the proposal stage. It's more brainstorming with them. This is what we came up with because you told us all of this already, and this is what we've come up with. So it's more of like an easier lift in that conversation.
That's really helpful. And I love the fact that you brought up deep visualization, because that's a practice of mine. The trick becomes, right, if you're too positive and it's too perfect, race day is not going to be that way. So how have you handled sort of in the moment, in the race, flats, injuries, you name it? How do you handle the not so positive aspects of your race day?
Because you're also visualizing solutions to problems. You're visualizing how you're going to fix a flat if the flat occurs. You're visualizing what happens if your goggles break in the swim. What are your 2 or 3 go-to solutions? So the visualization, yes, is always positive, but it is important to visualize what could occur as well as a problem, as long as you have the solution for it in the race. So it's pivoting your thinking to those positives. Not not easy to do sometimes, right? It's a simple concept, but definitely not easy to do. And in a presentation in business, when we're going through the rehearsals, as I mentioned, it's kind of the same thing. What could their objections be? What could the snafus be with this scenario? And we try to forecast that, and then have a solution for it.
So shifting gears slightly, how have you applied these same principles and your endurance mindset into your personal life?
I think the two things we've been discussing about finding solutions and focus forward and staying positive are two things I really work hard on in the personal life. Again, not always easy, right? Because we all have ups and downs in our personal lives. But those are probably two really good tools to use. The focus forward one is something I think about a lot. Years and years ago, I was going through a problem in business. And I was with a friend of mine who was a very established businessman. And I kept going over this problem with him, talking about it. And he just said to me, he's like, Lee, quit looking in the rear view, And again, and I think about that often. And so I think staying focused on the positive and focus forward are two tools that I use in my personal life.
So you mentioned a few years ago, he shone the light on that principle.
Yeah.
How about the others? How about the staying positive and the solutions to objectives? When did that sort of resonate for you?
I was in a role as a commercial director for an international company that sold a business intelligence service. And our chief commercial officer at that company at the time, really experienced, savvy, astute salesman, was really more like a mentor to me in more of the sales psychology. And I think he really helped to shape that solution selling way of thinking for me, even though it's been around for a long time and it's something, I've done for years. But I think he helped to polish that for me, that solution selling and overcoming objections, pardon me. So I think, that was just, maybe a number of years ago, if I had to say, but, focusing on solutions is something obviously any sales guy or gal, should be doing, you know what I mean? Like I shouldn't be presenting to a company, without knowing what their objectives are.
Mhm.
So in my world now, with sponsorship for a race car team, I try very hard to qualify or disqualify a prospect or, a company as quickly as possible. So much so that I try to get it done in one phone call because I don't have a lot of time. There's a lot of irons in the fire, and I try to qualify or disqualify companies before I even talk to them through research or when I'm talking to them, hey, this is what we do. What do you guys do? What are your problems? What do you think about car racing? What do you think about what I'm telling you right now? And then this is kind of what it takes to get involved with the team money-wise. Is that comfortable for you? Yes, no, okay. And so I try to do that kind of qualification early on because that saves us all time.
Sure. So in that, I'm curious, are most of these leads inbound, like they're chasing you, or the outbound you're chasing them?
There's so many sports properties, and in our world of like sports sponsorship globally and, nationally, there's so many sports properties, so many nonprofits, so many great organizations that are looking for corporate sponsorship. So it's a hard battle. So it's not very likely that you get a lot of incoming. You do get a percentage. I did get an incoming lead this morning. So a Monday morning incoming lead, I'll take any day of the week. Most of what we do is definitely falls into two areas. It's networking, using the network of our team owners, using our own personal business networks. And then it's outgoing prospecting in a very focused manner. For instance, there are some companies that wouldn't be a fit for a race car team. There are a lot of companies that would. So, it's a matter of looking at an industry sector and saying, wow, that industry sector would benefit from a partnership with our team. And then we kind of looked at it from industry sector standpoint.
That's helpful. Thank you. So looking at a race car team, and this is something I have very little experience of other than flipping through channels on the weekend, any unique dynamic in a race car team versus other sports teams that you've been involved in? Give us some insight to what it's like to be on a race car team.
I'll tell you from a client's point of view. And by the way, IndyCar racing is on NBC Peacock, and we run March to September. So just saying that. I'll tell you from the client's point of view, a lot of what we do is there's tied into the sponsorship, corporate hospitality. So if let's say I'm an IT company, and I've got a number of really big clients and I want to show them, a great experience to thank them for their business. What's going to be more exciting? Sitting in a suite at an NBA game, you have some wine, some chicken tenders, you're watching the game from 10,000 feet, or going into the pits at the Indy 500 and having a race car tear off in 5 feet in front of you with the smoke coming up and the smell and the sounds, and then we go into the suite, and then you can have the whole suite atmosphere. Then we don't have chicken nugget. So that's kind of what we offer. That's different than other sports. We really offer a really unique experience where we can take our guests into the suite of qualifying and practice, and during the race, put headsets on them. They can listen to the engineers talk to the race car drivers during the race or during qualifying. It's really a unique experience for all different kinds of people in business. So I think that's kind of what we offer. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, you nailed it. And I'm just about to offer you the Chief Endurance Officer podcast logo so you could put it here.
We would love that. We would love that. I'll send you your proposal later on.
Sounds great. Lee, let's change topics a little bit. Tell us a little bit more about you, your childhood, how you got into endurance racing, how you got to get into IndyCar teams. Give us a little bit more of your background.
Yeah, it's pretty simple, but people have said that it's kind of interesting at the same time because it's not very linear by any means. And one of my closest friends growing up for my whole life, he's a CPA, and he's been with the same CPA firm, I think, since we graduated high school, which was decades ago, so he's the yin to my yang because he's been so straightforward in his career. And, mine's kind of gone into very interesting avenues. But I swam all growing up, and then, so I had that. I never did any running or anything. And then transitioned right kind of last year of university, I transitioned to triathlon. I didn't swim for university though. I stopped after high school. But I got into triathlon straight away. And I was on a track for broadcast journalism in high school and college. That's what my focus was. High school and college was strictly broadcast journalism. And I loved it. And I actually started working in the field in college. I had already had 2 agents in college and was already working as a broadcaster. Mm. And then I did my first triathlon in 1996. And I was like, wow, I fell in love. I have to find a way to make this my life. And I actually said, screw this to broadcast journalism. I'm going to start a coaching company. I'm going to start being a coach. This was like 2 years after I started racing. And our sports national governing body offered the first coaching certification course. So I was one of the first 30 certified coaches. I was the youngest certified coach in the country at the time. And then I started my business. I started my coaching company. And what's really interesting is I needed money to start the business. I needed money for like business cards and stuff and just to kick it off. And the night I spoke to my parents, I was still a young guy, right? I was still in my 20s. So, you kind of still under your parents' wing a little bit. And I said to my parents, what I wanted to do. And they were like, all these years of broadcast journalism and going to university and all the experience, and you're going to go basically be a personal trainer. I was like, yeah, but I can do it. And here's why I can do it. And the night I told them, they gave me $200 for business cards. That same night, my agent from LA called me and told me they were dropping me from the agency. And it was kind of like, wow, that's, foreshadowing. So, it was kind of interesting the way that life works and things work. Cause I started that triathlon coaching company and I almost immediately started getting or going after corporate sponsors. And I had done a brief stint for like a year as head of marketing for a small soccer clothing company right before that. And part of that was I had gotten a lot of people coming to me for sponsorship because I was in charge of the brand of the soccer clothing. And so I understood sponsorship from that point of view. And then I had this triathlon coaching company and it grew kind of very quickly. So I was touching all of the athletes and I knew that I had, some influence with what the athletes were buying, and triathletes by and large are gearheads. So they love the gear. And so I started going after sports sponsorship, but then a couple interesting things happened just to land the plane. There was a very popular triathlon series that was on television at the time. And I was doing the series as a competitor, but I went to the owner of the series who was doing the TV himself. He was hosting the TV show and he was terrible. He was absolutely horrible. And I went into his office. I got a meeting with him. I went in and I said, listen, I do your series. I see you on the weekend. I love what you guys are doing. You have this TV show. I have all this broadcasting background. I have a coaching company. Let me help you host the TV show. And he said, okay. So we came up with this deal. And I started hosting that TV show. So what I started doing was I started selling sponsorship and telling companies I would get them on the TV show because it was in like 14 million households. And so I had like Palomar, and Palomar said, okay, Lee, you're hosting a TV show. If you get our logo on the air, we'll give you X amount as a media incentive clause in your contract. So I put a Palomar bumper sticker on the back of my clipboard on the show. So while I'm sitting there broadcasting, I had the clipboard, their logo was on there. And then I started selling. I said to the owner of the series, I said, why don't you let me do a gear review? Give me a minute, 90 seconds on every show to do a gear review, and we'll go over the coolest gear for triathletes. And I love that. I was selling that space to the companies that I was doing the gear review for. So I'd go to the bike companies and say, give me a bike, give me money, whatever, and I'll get you on this TV show. So that ended up, I did that for, I think, 12 years. I did that TV show. And the coaching company grew. I was getting corporate sponsors for the coaching company. Then some professional athletes approached me and asked me to do sponsorship for them. So I started a separate sports marketing company doing athlete management and sponsorship for professional triathletes and cyclists. And then I said, there's really no money in this because no one's paying triathletes anyway. Let me do the events. So I started representing the events, doing sponsorship for the events and getting sponsorship for Ironman events and other types of events. And I'm making a long story very short. And then I actually woke up and I said, wow, I love car racing. I've always loved car racing. There's very little money in sponsorship and endurance events as an agent, as a broker. It's just very little, even though I was very fortunate. I did a number of very big multi-year contracts. By and large, they don't come around often. And then through a number of very auspicious circumstances, I found myself working in motorsports, and that's how I started. So, and my first job in motorsports sponsorship was working on the Andretti Autosport team. So the biggest name in autosports that everyone knows, Andretti, and that was my first job.
I love how windy that story is. It's very similar in different principles to my background, right? It's like all these things that I've done across my career was a random walk until you look back and it's a straight line and it's brought you right here to today. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. It seems windy. It does seem windy. And there's a period, a number of years where I didn't work in sponsorship, but it was always business development, right? Um, and it was always sports. So it was always sports and business development. So if you look at it, I mean, my career has really been in sports marketing because I've been on all sides. I've been on the brand side. I was brand manager for AT&T. I worked for a number of agencies at the time. Obviously I worked on the team and athlete side. I was an athlete. So it has sort of been this uphill sports marketing, and now with the team that I'm on and chief commercial officer for this IndyCar team, it kind of has all come around.
It's amazing. Lee, we've got entrepreneurs, business owners, athletes that listen to this podcast, and I suspect they're all thinking differently about sponsorship. What insights could you provide our audience about how sponsorship can play a role in either as an entrepreneur or business owner and or an athlete?
Well, you have to have a reason, obviously, for the company to sponsor you. You have to have a compelling reason. You have to be going after the right prospects. I always tell people you have to kiss a lot of frogs, and it's very important to have a system in place so you can monitor all of your outreach. Just like any CRM that can help you monitor all of your outreach. I think that's very important. And then I think being relentless. I think you have to be relentless and you can't be afraid of rejection. Like the rejections used to bug me. And, now it's literally like a crumb, because I get rejections all the time for some reasons. I shouldn't say it. For the most part, they really don't bug me. Occasionally you put a lot of extra work and you really feel like this company is really going to be a great partner. And then for some reason they don't do it. They don't pull the plug. And occasionally they do bug you, but it's basically only for a day. But you have to be relentless. You have to kiss a lot of frogs. I think you have to have a compelling reason for them to sponsor your property.
You mentioned rejection. I was sitting through this keynote presentation probably a year ago, and the gentleman in the front of the room was talking about sales, and he picked up this coin and it has yes on one side and no on the other. And he goes, look, I want you to flip this I need you to get as many yeses as you can within a minute. And if you get over 100, I'll pay you $1 or something. And you just see the participant flipping as many times as they can. And they never care about the no's. And his point at the end was, look, you got to go through a lot of no's to get to a yes. So start with no, like almost look for the no.
Yeah.
Thought it was fascinating.
That's to my point. Looking for their objections early on to qualify or disqualify them early on. If they say, no, we don't have any budget. No, we're not into car racing. No, we're already sponsoring tennis, whatever it should be. You want to get those no's because that's going to help you, go forward or not go forward as quickly as possible. I mean, I think a lot of sponsor finders and agents, whatever, I think they're so passionate about their property and they just keep going after a company, just keep badgering them time and time again. It's like, listen, if you don't hear back from them after 4 touches, move on, disqualify them, move out of the way, tell them, say, we haven't heard from you. We just want to thank you for any time. And if anything should change, please let us know. But I just don't think I think salespeople generally are afraid to disqualify.
It's a very good point. Lee, I'm going to change topics on you slightly. And we talked about visualization earlier in the show. Any other personal habits or routines that you have that you can share with the audience?
I mean, you and I both, I think, cut from the same cloth. I think exercise, right? I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's just going for a walk first thing in the morning. I always encourage people to exercise first thing in the morning. My routine is pretty stable. I'm definitely one of that group. very early riser, and then exercise is a key component. Visualization and journaling are part and parcel of what I do almost every morning. And very specific journaling with very specific personal messages in there, and goal setting for the day. And I think that that's part of my key routine.
Man, we are cut from the same cloth. What else do you do for fun?
Yeah, well, I've got a wonderful daughter, so spend as much time as I can with her. So she'll be going to college in about a year. So I'm a teenage girl's got a lot going on. She's got a lot of friends. There's a lot of moving parts. She's going out. She's doing things. So I cherish every minute I get with her. And then about a year and a half ago, I picked up jujitsu. So through jujitsu, I've just absolutely become enthralled with this practice. I think that's kind of the main thing I do for fun, even though it's somewhat physical. But I haven't raced since 2013, so I stopped racing quite a while ago. But I've enjoyed cycling and running, so I keep cycling and running because it's my exercise of choice. And then jiu-jitsu has been just the last year and a half.
I've got friends that speak passionately about jiu-jitsu as well, and I haven't dabbled in that yet. What is it about jiu-jitsu that gets you going?
You know how when you did triathlons, right? You do triathlon. All right. So you know how in that tri world, it's like if you did a tri and you're now a triathlete, like it's different. You're not just a runner that just goes out and enjoys running 3 or 4 days a week, right? There's something different. We get really into it, right?
Yeah.
Some people do a triathlon and they're like, okay, one and done, wasn't necessarily for me. But a lot of people like yourself, it becomes your lifestyle and it becomes kind of this aura around you. Would you agree with that?
100%.
Okay. Triathlon, jiu-jitsu is the same way with people. It either sticks or it doesn't stick. But if it sticks, for most people, I've found, and again, I'm very, very new to it, just a year and a half. I've found that it becomes this aura and it's something that's a very important part of their life. Now, why? You're asking why is that? I can't answer for other people, but I can tell you there's kind of 2 schools of thought with jiu-jitsu. There's the competitive jiu-jitsu schools and the self-defense jiu-jitsu schools. I go to a self-defense. It's not competition focused or anything like that. And it's a very, I guess for me, it's a very storied school. The family that runs it has a long history of generations in jiu-jitsu. And I think what resonates with me the most is not just the practice, and I'll get into that in a second, but it's sort of the family storytelling and the culture that they've built behind the school. I like that very much. But as far as the practice goes, it's so difficult. And I think as a triathlete, right, like you and I, very, very difficult. We gravitate towards a hard thing. Ironman is a freaking hard thing. We gravitate towards it. Sponsorship is really, really hard. I gravitate towards it. Jiu-jitsu, it's so difficult. It is very much like human chess. It's there's not there's not much that I know about it because I am very new in just a year and a half. So there's so much to learn, and I think that that's one of the things I really like about it. It's also provided an amazing sense of community and friends. So I think that's been a big part of it for me personally, is having this community and this friend group. But the practice itself, the number one thing I can say, and I actually want to, anyone who's listening to this, want to really vocalize this for women and girls, because my daughter actually does some jiu-jitsu as well. I think it's super important for people to know how to defend themselves, number one. But the number one thing it's given me is more confidence. It's given me more confidence in personal relationships, in business, and for myself. And it's not something I was very aware of before I started it. And it's something that's talked about very openly between everybody at our school. And I'm sure in other jiu-jitsu schools as well. but having a sense of confidence because you feel secure in yourself. Not cockiness, not arrogance, but just a sense of confidence. I think that that's probably the number one thing I took away. I never took away confidence from triathlon. So what? I can swim, bike, and run pretty quick, right? Like, it didn't give me a sense of confidence. But I think just knowing that you have some tools in your tool chest personally on a day-to-day basis, gives you more confidence.
Lee, that's really powerful. And as a father of two girls, younger girls, I think I need to add that sport to their lineup.
I watched the kids' classes there, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old girls and boys. I'm just like, this is amazing. Like, my daughter's going to go away to college. She's going to have some tools in her tool chest to protect herself. You know, like, as a father, it gives me a lot of security in knowing that. Now, I wish she took it 3 days a week, but she doesn't. But I'll take what I can get.
Well, if she's a teenage girl, she's busy with lots and lots of different things.
Yeah.
Lee, if an audience member would like to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
I do a lot on LinkedIn. I think you and I both are pretty much, really focused on LinkedIn as professionals. So LinkedIn is great. I'm also Twitter. It's just my name on Twitter. And then I have a website, which is Zohlman.com, Zohlman.com. I actually do a blog on there. So I post on there. It's usually about business and sports, and it's usually in that realm, and kind of the connection between business and sports somehow, or business and the athlete mindset. So usually writing on there once or twice a month. But those would be the best places.
Fantastic. And we'll include those links in our show notes. Lee, it's been awesome having you on the show. I really enjoyed how we kicked it off, talking about the endurance mindset and finding solutions to others' objectives. And then we got into personal habits and visualization. And we started gravitating to hard things. And we just closed it off talking about gaining confidence and building confidence, and through sport, through jiu-jitsu. There's a lot of powerful messages that we've gone through today. Audience members, please like this show. Please share it with your community. Let's spread this word so that the endurance mindset can empower more people to do more things. Lee, awesome having you on the show. Thank you for your time.
Well said. Thanks for having me on, and great stuff. And just try one jiu-jitsu class, please.
On the internet shortly.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. To hear more inspiring stories and strategies around the endurance mindset, be sure to subscribe below or visit us at chiefenduranceofficer.com. Until next time, keep pushing those limits.